33-year-old state assemblyman Zohran Mamdani, born 1991, delivering a major upset in the New York City mayoral primary last night, a contest that some are saying could forecast the future of the broader Democratic Party. President Trump weighing in on Mamdani's expected victory just within the past hour, slamming him as a, quote, 100% communist lunatic and warning that, quote, Democrats have crossed the line. A self-described Democratic socialist, Mamdani poised to beat former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who had been backed by prominent figures in the party's establishment after running on a platform that he says should serve as a model for the National Democratic Party. Zohran Mamdani's rise, though, was fueled by a massive presence on social media that clipped, in many cases, performances like this one.
I have never had to resign in disgrace. I have never cut Medicaid. I have never stolen hundreds of millions of dollars from the MTA. I have never hounded the 13 women who credibly accused me of sexual harassment. I have never sued for their gynecological records, and I have never done those things because I am not you, Mr. Cuomo. And furthermore, the name is Mamdani, M-A-M-D-A-N-I.
Wow. David Axelrod.
That was a spanking right there.
I mean, candidates matter, I guess. What do you take away from this?
I think that exchange went viral in a really big way, and it in some ways encapsulated the dynamic of this race, because Andrew Cuomo got into this race to try and come back from being forced out of the governorship, from being disgraced by what happened, and this was. But there was always this sense that he, wasn't all that interested, and when he attacked, it's a fair point to ask Mamdani about his experience, but he just opened himself up to that, and it reminded people that he was the past and that it was time to move on. And I think that was part of the dynamic that governed this race.
What do you think this means, big picture? Like, how much should we be taking away from what we've seen here?
I think there are things we should take away and there are things that we shouldn't. I mean, winning a Democratic primary in New York is different than winning a primary somewhere else or an election somewhere else. But there are certain things that I think do travel. One is the issue of affordability is one that you can feel in every district in this country, and that is why he ultimately won, because he owned that issue. He drove it in a really, really effective way, and I think the New Yorkers who voted for him were very much moved by it. I also think there's a message in here about young people. He brought young people out in a way that we haven't seen in a long time, and I think there is a message from young voters in this country that the same old, the status quo isn't working. I said yesterday when I was on the show, 25% of the early voters had never voted in a primary before, and many of them were young because they felt like he was genuinely addressing their concerns, affordability being at the top of the list with proposals that we can debate, but at least they seemed tangible. They weren't the same old political jargon, and I think there's a lesson in that as well.
So you are a longtime political hack, right?
Yeah,
it's on tap.
I wear that proudly.
Everyone should listen.
Sure, Brad does too.
One of the things about this race that fascinates me as a political reporter, and I'm curious what you think, Cuomo seemed to run a very traditional, TV media, paid media-based campaign. In my personal life, I make a point to filter out that kind of stuff in my own personal Instagram and other accounts. Mamdani was all over. Like, I learned about Mamdani from my own personal, friends and from that ecosystem. Do you think that one of Cuomo's big failures was not doing it that way? I
think every aspect of his campaign was yesterday, honestly. And Ashley Ashley lives in this world of social media. Talk about
dreadfully.
That. Yeah. No. But talk about the techniques that he used, which I think were, a lot of it has to do with the messenger,
too. Yeah.
Because he's utterly authentic.
Well, I don't even think if Cuomo actually tried to run the campaign that Mamdani did, he could have, because he is not a translatable candidate on social media. You had great clips that were engaging, seeing him on the subway. Like, does Cuomo even live in New York City is the question, to be on the subway
What do we think is
first.
the last time Cuomo took the subway?
Right, exactly,
get
to
somewhere.
actually get somewhere, right? And so people who ride the subway, they know the good and the bad of the subway, and so he brought it, but then he had other people conveying his message also. People who didn't look like him, people who weren't of the same faith as him, people who weren't in the same economic class of his. I think the lesson that I am learning for this is, and I want Democrats to listen hard, and it's like, why was Andrew Cuomo actually even the option for Democrats to be choosing against in that moment? He was rebuked by many Democrats that eventually came out and endorsed him, which is compromising. And young people notice that. It feels inauthentic. And the whole November election, we went back and forth, and you told me everything was too expensive. So we had a candidate talking about everything being too expensive, and guess what? He won.
Look at that.
You're right that slipper only fits Cinderella, and he's Cinderella in this case. But I think that this election matters to Democrats, not in New York, but in other places around the country. Because this morning, in congressional districts all over, left-wing Fruit Loops woke up and said, why not me? And so they're going to run as candidates against their incumbent Democrat member of Congress in primaries. They're going to run in open seats. Well, I've seen this movie before. Republicans, we had this problem in 2010.
You got a few Fruit Loops of your own.
Yeah.
So,
But you know what else
I will
mattered
readily
in
admit
this
it.
one? Is ranked choice voting, actually, is another thing that really mattered. And
Yeah.
and this campaign did a strategic job of having people cross-endorse, particularly on like the Lander and Mamdani cross endorsement actually was big because there were some questions about being vulnerable with Jewish voters, and that endorsement mattered. And that was a strategic, political, operative, aggressive approach that actually was.
Can I tell you, I woke up this morning, and you will appreciate this, not to date you in any way. But I woke up this morning and this Bob Dylan lyric was in my head. Come senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway. Don't block up the hall. For he that gets hurt will be he who has stalled. The battle outside raging will soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changing. That's what young people in this town were saying. We're tired of the same kind of brain-dead politics, the hypocrisy and so on. And they expressed themselves in this election yesterday.
Could I just add, though, that what happened in New York, I think in some places in this country, it will be similar, but in a lot of places it won't. Andrew Cuomo was not, it's polite to say he was a flawed candidate. And Mamdani was energetic, charismatic, out there working hard. But if you go just next door to New York, to New Jersey, where Mickey Sherrill is running, if you go to Virginia, where Abigail Spanberger, those are two centrist Democrats likely to win their races.
There is one thing I would like to play also. This, Cuomo worked to make this an issue in the race, but also many Jewish people who live in New York have raised questions about Mamdani. And this is a clip of an interview that he did with Tim Miller over at the Bulwark, where he was pressed about the phrase globalize the intifada, which has become something that has come up in these pro-Palestine protests. I want to play how Mamdani answered that question. Take a look.
The phrase globalized intifada, from the river to the sea, does that make you uncomfortable, or do you think
Okay, those are
comfortable?
different. Those are super different.
They're not
Those are
really
like different genres.
I'm sorry, I'm asking Zoran. Then they're not really different to me, and to some people they're not different.
You know, I know people for whom those things mean very different things. And to me, ultimately, what I hear in so many is a desperate desire for equality and equal rights.
So this is part of why Ashley was underscoring that the alliance between Mamdani and Lander was so important, because it inoculated in some ways some of these criticisms. But David Axelrod, globalize the intifada is viewed as a call to violence against Jewish people, and this is the most the most Jewish city in the world.
Has that same implication.
Yeah.
Listen, I've said it before. I'm the son of a Jewish refugee. I feel really. I was devastated by what happened on October 7th. I also weep for the children of Gaza. I want to know that he weeps for the people who were brutalized and sexually assaulted and murdered and kidnapped on October 7th, and that there is an understanding that that rights should be pervasive, that respect for human dignity should be pervasive, and so I think he's going to need to communicate that to Jews and non-Jews in this city.
This is a big problem for Democrats. They've increasingly got out of the lane where the center of this country is. I mean, Democrats, Harry Truman is one that recognized Israel's statehood. Democrats have long held an advantage. Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, we have a long line here. I'm not saying that the mayor of New York or the presumptive mayor of New York is going to drive the entire party, but it is a thing that if I were a Democrat strategist, I would be paying attention to. How do we fix our anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist position?
People don't have to agree with everything that this guy says, and I think that's one thing that we have to recognize. And if you feel strongly on this issue, then repudiate him for saying it.
Yeah.
But he also has the opportunity to express himself on this in a way that might allay some concern.
And he has been asked in many other iterations where he is condemning anti-Semitism, and I think actions will speak louder. And he talked about how he was going to be a mayor for all of New Yorkers, including Jewish Americans, and he was going to put part of the budget in New York City on an anti-hate crimes, specifically targeting anti-Semitism. So if he becomes the mayor, he will need to live up to that, because those words should not be acceptable. And I think he has shown, at least in the campaign,
He's going to have plenty of opportunities between now and November, because
show,
there is
yeah.
going to be an election in November. The mayor's on the ballot.
Yeah.
And perhaps others will be on the ballot. Doesn't sound like Cuomo is, but this is going to be an issue.
it's going to be a race.
For sure.